All right, so this is the third 9 weeks review for Benchmark. I'm going to go through what we discussed on Monday. We talked about author style, and when I asked you to read this, we basically talked about the most important thing is not what is said, but how it is said. That's what we look at when we determine author style. It could be several different elements, from the choice of words, the tone, the sentence structures, and so forth. Do they give you flowery details, or do they give you short, concise details? Is it a sincere tone, or is there a sarcastic tone? That's what we did think about when we consider author's style. And we read this quote on Monday from Faulkner, where he talks about the same thing that the quote beside him from Anne Lamott. They're both talking about writing, but they say it in two different ways. One has a more proper tone or formal tone, whereas the other, she likens it to, she likens the difference between man and animals and insects. She talks about sheep lice, but they're both talking about the same thing. So that's just a good little snapshot of the difference between the style that an author may have. So when you think about author's tone, whether or not they have an informal or a formal tone, you want to think about, for informal text, these are the basic characteristics that you will see in a passage that is informal. It will be casual. The language will be casual. You will have slang or colloquial expressions that are probably specific to a certain area, country, or region. Contractions, don't, can't. And then oftentimes in informal language, you might see I or you. And I have an example here. So you think you can dance, huh? Well, I'll show you how much you can't throw down as well as I can. And I know that y'all don't really talk that way, but you see these contractions here. You can't throw down. And throw down, even, that's a slang expression for dance really well. So this is something that you'd have to explain to someone who didn't speak English or didn't speak English as a first language oftentimes. But informal text features, the following are the bullet points here that you will see in formal writing. The tone is polite but personal, but it's more serious. You might see academic or scholarly language. You do not use slang or casual language or expressions that are colloquial, and you will find more complex vocabulary in sentences. So here's another example of this, a similar saying as we saw in the slide before. You think you can dance, huh? You can't throw down as well as I can. Well, let's try to say that in a more formal tone. Notification has been administered in regards to the desire to participate in the dance competition. Having a strong determination to do so, your opponent has declared impending victory. So here's a more formal tone saying pretty much the same thing. Another feature that you want to consider with author style is the difference between vivid word choice and concise sentence structure. Vivid word choice puts the reader in the story. It doesn't necessarily have to be a poem or a poetic tone. It can be very conversational. The main thing is that the author wants you to feel, taste, hear, touch, smell what's happening in the passage. For example, meeting the band backstage was extraordinary, indescribable, and indefinable. The lead singer offered us some freshly baked lemon cream-filled petits that had been prepared just for them. The bass player played different riffs for us over and over and over again in attempts to minimize nervousness. Each member told us something embarrassing about themselves. We could not fathom a more compelling, amusing, and entertaining evening. So you see, this person or this narrator is very vivid. They want you to really feel like you're there. The opposite would be a more concise, using more concise sentence structures or word choices. A concise writer uses the fewest words possible without changing or sacrificing the meaning. When you see a concise passage, there aren't unnecessary verbs or adjectives. So let's look at this example saying the same thing of the backstage experience. We met the band backstage. They shared refreshments, stories, and music with us. It was an exciting experience. This is the exact same thing, but it's much more concise, to the point, cutting to the chase, as we might say. All right, so which word best describes the author's style? We're going to do a little bit of practice. And you did this when you got with your team challenge on yesterday. And so this is an excerpt from Pride and Prejudice. A lot of people wanted to choose conversational because it is a conversation. However, it's more formal because of the types of words that are being used. I shall not. I am particularly acquainted. It would be insupportable. So even though I know this is reflecting a different time period, but it's still conversational. It lends itself more to casual tone. This is a more proper, more formal tone in the author's writing. And that's what you see here in the slide. And you learned that when you took your team challenge quizzes yesterday. Then also, we have this passage from Geraldo, No Last Name. And we see in this, especially in the boxed section of the passage, you see the contraction, don't. And before that, she'd. So we said that is indicative of informal tone. And then the colloquial phrase, hit and run. Someone who's not a native English speaker might literally think of someone tapping somebody on the back and running away. But as a colloquial expression, we know this means hit and run would imply a car or an accident dealing with a vehicle. So we know that, but we don't want to use a slang or a colloquial expression when we're writing or when we're looking at an informal passage or a formal passage. Excuse me. This would be indicative of something you would see in informal writing. So even though these are short little sentences with a period, this is still not necessarily. It's more informal than it is concise. Okay, some people wanted to choose concise because you have these little short one-word sentences. And then finally, we have this example of the family that moved into Pearl Street from that passage. Again, this is vivid word choice. This isn't necessarily a poetic type passage, but the author uses words that are more adjectives, more vivid. He really wants you to see this family. And he didn't just say they wore a vaporous tunic, right? He said they're clad in a vaporous tunic. Pants of sky blue cloth. You know, most of us would just say, oh, they had on baby blue pants or sky blue. And he talks about not just a street with a bunch of palmetto trees. He talks about a palmettoed Pearl Street, okay? And the girls, slim, lovely beings, okay? Again, this is very vivid. He wants us to really see this exotic family that moved into their neighborhood. All right? And so in our last passage, most of you got that one correct. The imagery is just bubbling over in this passage. You see extreme climates, lies green and billowy, the smell of strong weeds. That's a good example of imagery. All right, so today we're going to talk about thesis.